Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the SNap-X30 from RateFPV.
Oh, shoot.
The flight controller is the F722. That is a 40 amp all-in-one flight controller, and the USB port is right here, and that is a USB-C. The motor spec on the website says 1404 3800 kV, but I'm seeing 1505 3800 kV printed on the motor. And on that motor is the HQ DT76 tri-bladed prop. That's the V2 prop. Of course, I've got the 04 Pro inside mine, but you can, according to their website, install it with the 04 Wide, which does require a slightly different kit, so make sure if you're going to their website, you're selecting the option that you actually need. We have two ball options for our battery strap. You can use one or both. Primary option is with these metal brackets, and then the second option, it runs through the tail. It does have little metal pieces on both sides. XT30 for your battery connection, and inside this trap door would be where you have the GPS, and it's got a little quick connector down there and a little sticky pad for you. The main trick of the SNap-X30 is the camera pod. Comes right out without any tools. You just pull on these little two tabs on the side and it lifts right out. Then you disconnect the connector, but we'll look at that later. On my scale, it weighs 240 grams with the 04 Pro. I did slow cinematic flying on all these batteries. With the 3000 milliamp lithium ion cell, it weighs 440.83 grams. With the 930 milliamp 4S G&B battery, it weighs 340.33 grams. And with the 850 G&B, the flower print, it weighs 327.14 grams. And finally, with the G&B 720, it weighs 308.2 grams. Top carbon fiber plate looks to be 2.6 millimeters thick, and motor post to motor post looks like 140 millimeters. It does come with extra prop protection, an extra set of props. We get an extra battery pad, we get prop screws, you get a dongle that you can connect to an external power board for GPS purposes, pan head screws, other various sorts of screws that just might fall out. And a little hex tool if those screws do fall out. We do get a wiring map on the flight controller, safety operation guidelines and precautions. We get a rack assembly manual printed on two sides. And we get a modular installation instruction manual. Well, I've already shown you a little teaser with a crash, and we'll get back to that. We're gonna do a crash analysis on that crash because I think that's a pretty important part of the makeup of this video. But we're gonna start off with my traditional freestyle-ish sort of flight because, well, I just I'm feeling it. And one of the things about this one that I was surprised with, I've flown a lot of these, 3-inch, 2.5-inch, 2.2-inch, 2-inch, 1.6-inch, all these different style with the prop protection. But I was actually quite impressed with the flight characteristics of this one. The flight performance didn't blow my mind with like super big grunty motors or anything. I just thought it really kind of flew pretty well and it was well tuned. Matter of fact, when I get to doing the power loops over the little tree over here at the end of the yard that's kind of horizontal, a few times I come in kind of flat and it really just handled it without prop wash issues at all. So that's was surprising to me. It just handled pretty nicely for this type of quad and this sort of non-designed for flight style. So I wanted to start with it because I enjoyed flying it this way. Out of the box, I did have concerns, seeing all this different plastic and interlocking pieces and a pod, and we're going to get to all that as I said, but I was really concerned about the damage that might occur, and I'll spoil it to a degree because obviously I had the crash that happened organically. I don't, for all those 90%ers out there, you know who you are. While I haven't intentionally crashed one quad repeatedly, I'm not a 90%er in where I have a science wall like Heads does and I crash them repeatedly. I kind of like for the crashes to happen organically, and sooner or later I screw up and I make a mistake like I already showed you in this video with that little teaser clip. But it flew really well, and this flight came afterwards. So obviously that crash didn't have a completely detrimental effect. We will also be looking at some samples of cinematic flight or slower flight in a couple of different wind environments, because that was one of the areas that I was also surprised by. So I wanted to make sure I showed you all these different opportunities that I have to share with you about this particular quad. They do note on their website that if you've got one of the later 04 Pros where the gyro is switched out, that you'll need to turn off rock steady, otherwise you'll get unstable video recorded to your 04 Pro. So that's something to definitely be aware of if you're wanting that silky smooth cinematic and you want it with the internal gyro stabilized. They're saying that you won't get stable video with an 04 Pro with the new IMU or new gyro that DJI switched to here. It's been a little bit. This flight was on the 850 milliamp G&B flower print battery. I am not going to nail the flight voltage. I was still tinkering with my voltage warnings, but you see we got a pretty solid 3 minutes of a pretty heavy flight, and our battery is recovered at 3.6 volts per cell. This is going to be our slow cinematic. It's not a full sun day, unfortunately. This is one of, I don't know what you call it, but where you've got clouds, but you get a lot of sun through the clouds. I don't know what the term would be. Nothing comes to mind. Obviously, I didn't look for weather definitions or something like that. But it is a nice bright day. You can see all the lines in the grass that are lawn service. They always do a nice job of making sure they use straight lines with their mower. And they do a fantastic job. They do in 40 minutes what it takes me like 3 hours, 4 hours to do, and then my knees bother me and my back bothers me for a week, and then I'm back out there the next week doing it all over again. So I'm very thankful to have them. Spent years doing it myself. Winds are important on this. This is only 3 to 6 miles an hour officially, and you can see we get up above the house, above the tree line. So whatever winds are, in actual real world case, this will be confronted with it. And we do switch back and forth between the onboard Rocksteady footage, which my 04 I did buy a long time ago, and I've been using it across these reviews where I get quads that don't have 04 Pros in it. So this is my own 04 Pro, and it is older, so it's not prone to the gyro switch that DJI had. So that's something else I want to make very clear, because they stated on their own website that if you're using Rocksteady, that if you want smooth footage, you're going to need to do that separately outside of using Rocksteady on the 04 Pro. But we're going to switch back and forth. We're only going to watch about another minute of this sample so we can move on to the next sample. And you could see it specifically when we're in the goggle view, the DVR view, where it has all the Betaflight elements on the OSD, the text. You could see that low wind was still affecting how smooth the video came in, and you might even be able to hear it a little bit. But when we come down out of that wind, which is very, very minimal for my place this time of year. Matter of fact, my freestyle flights came in similar winds. We've had very calm winds recently. It still had, in that low wind, it still kind of jittered around. But I'll have another sample coming up here in just a moment that we'll look at in slightly higher winds, so you can get a better fix on the cinematic sort of capabilities with smooth footage. But let's go ahead and let's roll into that now. This one is going to be in 3 to 6 miles an hour and 89 degrees. I didn't report the temperature of the previous one. Unfortunately, I didn't write it down, or is it 87? I'm just kind of looking through my notes here. Unfortunately, I got a little bit disorganized apparently when I was writing stuff down from my flight sessions with this. But not terrible hot this time around on the cinematic stuff. Matter of fact, it did finally cool down, and we got below 90 here for almost a week. I think even in the next couple days it should be right around that 90 degree marker, 90 Fahrenheit that is. But again, these winds are a little bit higher, 6 to 9 miles an hour. And you can see I'm doing the circling above the tree line, and you can see that the winds is having an effect on our video footage, especially if you're just looking at the DVR view as we were, and then we switch over to the stabilized. So if you have an older 04 Pro, this is the result you would be able to expect in this sort of wind on this particular quad. But if you've got a newer 04 Pro, you're going to have to turn Rocksteady off, and you're going to have to do some stabilization outside of Rocksteady, if that's even of interest to you. Some people like these with prop protection because they feel the extra safety, whether it's a safety of not damaging the things they're flying around, or the animals, or people, or they're just a little bit of a peace of mind. And I do understand that. But when it comes to the freestyle, I've said this a few times, but I always have to repeat it in case there's someone new. If you compare the same weight, the same prop size, same mechanical configuration, and you compare a open prop to a closed prop, the open prop is going to be smoother in cinematic sort of flying, and it's going to outperform in freestyle. That's just generally going to be how it is. There's no two ways around that. But we've come down out of the wind like we did in the other pass where the winds were much lower, and you can see where our stable is video. And this is just kind of cruisy. Some people just enjoy this sort of flying, flying like a bird or flying like an airplane or a wing. So we can enjoy FPV and quads and all sorts of different flight. But I think it's enough of that. Let's go down to the desk and let's do a little bit of our crash analysis. First, we're just going to look at some photos. So this honest, I'm not trying to tell tales out of school here. This is how it landed. And we'll take a look at the video footage again, and I think this will make a little bit more sense. So we've got the camera pod over here, and we've got the quad over there. So it landed pretty close. This was just my first close-up picture that I took with it still laying in the grass. You can see that the tail that attaches to your 04 or 04 Pro, it doesn't retract on its own, but it's got a sheath around it that kind of stiffens the wires. And then you slide it in and out. That's how you're able to manipulate the pod and keep it attached. If you have to plug it in before you click the pod down in place. You can also see right up here where these little points are coming out that this section of the frame did pop out on that crash. This is the part of the frame to do a repair that you would take out. So these two screws and then those two screws, and you see I'm missing a screw. And also this screw right up here was a little bit loose. So this just holds the antenna in. So if you need to do a repair, you just have 4 screws to remove. And this section from here to here will all come out. Just a quick picture I took, and in the moment I did not see any damage. But if you look closely, that front clip, the nose clip, because you do go in nose first and then to clip the rear end back down, it did break off a little bit. So also with this USB port, now I have a USB cable where I have shaved one side of the plastic off and I am able to plug in to this. But I think if you have a traditional USB cable, and if it's not a long-nosed USB-C cable, I don't think you're going to be able to plug into this. I'm pretty certain. I looked through the instructions after I'd mounted mine up. This is how it's got to be mounted up, because this cable is a real short adapter that you do get with the kit, and it plugs in to the back of the 04 Pro. There's just no way to run this cable and plug it in down here, and you certainly couldn't rotate your 04 180 degrees to plug it in on the far side. It's just not going to reach this little adapter cable that plugs into the 04 Pro, into the quad, and then into the 04 Pro VTX. It's just very short. It's got to go this way. And you can see on the front of my 04 Pro, yeah, you may have noticed it already, that top little clip that they have on the 04s did get broken. Looks like we've got a little bit of damage up here, but it's not broken off. Like this is kind of broken. And then that plate where it's separated, we kind of already pointed that out, but I took another picture, so I thought I would share that as well. And another picture of it as well. And you can see at that time I was flying 720 G&B, but it's got the sub 250 branding on it. But the cable end, as we see in this picture, the cable end just pulled out. So that's the nice thing. It really didn't have any 04 damage except for my the tumbling in my crash and my camera. So this is going to be part of our crash analysis here. And we've got our 2 tracks down here. So I've got my camera track that records audio, and then we've got the FPV camera on the quad itself. And I thought it was fairly interesting to look at this as I just kind of weave in and out. And then I bang off this post. And honestly, when this happened, I did not realize I had hit this post. I was shocked. I didn't know what I'd hit because, I'd done that pass thousands of times. But this time I just cut it too close and I clipped it. And we wanged off of it and immediately go into a spin. And then it starts to straighten out a little bit. And it's going to head into that metal chair and wang. I think this is where I got my camera damage on that top little protective piece. So we bang off of that. And then our video cuts out. Now let's take this track away. And I want to go back. And we can see it in real view. Let me zoom this track before we get too deep into this analysis. Okay, I think I've got things adjusted here. Hopefully you can see this. I know we're looking at a smaller window than we might normally if we were looking at a full screen. But we're just going to go kind of real slowly through here. And you can see the quad entered right there. Hopefully you were able to see that. Let me go back a frame. Got the quad. Hits. Turns over. Turns over. Turns over. You see it right up there, hopefully. Turns over. Can't believe I caught the whole thing on my little audio camera here. It starts to straighten out to where we're gonna nosedive right into that chair. Oh no! Keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. Wang, do you see that chair move? Look how much that chair moves when it hits. I was surprised by that. And then if you look just above the chair, see this little part right up here? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? It's really hard to follow. This, I think, is the camera pod itself. In this resolution in Premiere, it gets better if I pause after each frame. It kind of clears itself up. Let's go forward a couple frames. You can see some parts down here moving around. I think that's the pod as well, and I think the frame went ahead and headed down on this way. The chair is still moving. Let's just play this kind of in real time so that we can enjoy it one more time from this third-person point of view. Look at that chair. It's rocking. There's a ghost in that chair. And it's still rocking. And in the recording, it's still bouncing. So that was kind of a fun analysis to go through kind of the construction of this. The last thing I'll cover is the camera pod, but before we get there, because I didn't report the flight times, I got 14 minutes on this battery discharging down to 3.1 volts and ended up landing at about 3.2 volts, so you could get more out of it. So that was just a little bit over 14 minutes. I've only got the one battery. With the 930s, which I tested a few of those, I got about 9 minutes of this cruisy sort of flight. The 850, I got 7 minutes and 20 seconds out of these 850s from G&B, and then with the 720s from G&B, I got 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's your cruising around cinematic sort of flight time battery report. Now for the camera pod, I'm gonna kind of hopefully be able to show this, but we just pull on those. You can see how it comes right out, and then you pull this forward. Hopefully you could see that that all comes out. It's a little bit fussy the first time around to get this connected, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do it on camera. But it just comes right out. And then a little closer look, this clip, you can see how much of it is broken because this part I think is still intact up here, this very edge, but the rest of that broke off. But then to connect it back together, hopefully I can do this fairly well on camera. There we go. I think I got it pretty much. Maybe a final push with my fingernails on both sides with even pressure. And then you clip in the nose first, that little nose piece down there that's kind of clipped off. It has a little home that it goes in down there. So you put that in there first. And then you kind of push this back. Well, this is how I did it. And then I kind of feed this back with my fingers. I don't want to pinch my cable in there too bad. And then you just give it a squeeze and it snaps right into place. Now, obviously, these are not meant, or they're not primarily designed around freestyling and crashing. Something else about the freestyling or flying it more aggressively, this is the max camera angle I was able to get, which is, I would say it's close to right around 20 degrees. Normally I fly at somewhere around 25 to 30 degrees, and I did notice it in my flights. You know, the muscle memory with the fingers and the moves that you tend to do when you're flying at a different camera angle, they're a little bit different, so you're not quite on point. But this is one of the lower camera angles I think you're limited to when it comes to this style quad. I could be telling tales out of school. That's just from memory. But I actually spent some extra time trying to adjust to make sure I got each screw loosened and pushed and making sure I got it all the way as far as I could get it to the top. You can see from the camera pod itself, there's very little space above that. I didn't mention in the quick specs, but this does have LED. Let me just turn it on here and hopefully it's activated even though I don't have a... So it's controlled by a switch. So you can have it on or off. Comes with a nice blue LED. And I do believe it's just blue. This isn't programmable. So that is the SNap-X30 from RateFPV. And I thought, especially this time around, the crash analysis, maybe I went overboard with that. But let me know if you guys enjoyed that sort of breakdown, because it's not all the time that I capture crashes that I can actually show you from that, table point of view, and the camera's pointing in that direction. I don't hit that post all that much, but I thought that was kind of fun, and it introduces something different that if you're just watching the video for enjoyment, that maybe that might be something that we could do in the future if I were to be so lucky and unlucky to have a crash and capture it on my table camera that I usually just use for audio purposes. But let me know down in the comments what you think of that. And I'm also curious, I know that this isn't the first company to introduce a pod for your video system, and I've heard from a couple of people, but really not very many, that do like these sort of systems where they can take their 04, because it is, here in the US at least, and maybe other places, hard to get, or maybe it's just the expense, that you can take it and put it on other quads when you just want to fly something different. Is that a prevailing thing, or is it fairly niche based that where there's not a lot of people? I'm curious about that, because they also have a quad that is a 5-inch quad that they wanted me to review, and I declined because I don't do 5-inch quads, that you could put this pod into. So that's another feature of this particular quad. You have the quick access to your internals with just the 4 screws. You've got pretty good freestyle-ish sort of performance. I showed it to you, so hopefully I showed it well enough. And then you've got the quick action pod. I do have a concern about the USB port, and I'll show it here on camera because I do have it somewhat handy. Well, I thought I had it handy. I'll go ahead and record a special sample and just put it over the top, but you can see that at some point in my FPV YouTube, I found that I needed a USB-C cable and shaved off one side of it. So I have that, and I did use that, and I don't think a traditional one would fit. At least with how I have it mounted. Maybe I did miss something in the instructions after I did look, but it seems to me that's the only way you could put the 04 Pro in there. But if you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about the SNap-X30 from RateFPV, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.